resources and help that other folks provide that we can access. So not necessarily things that we can do on our own. That is just, what I'm trying to say there. So in our conversations, we talk a lot about things like communication. We talk about consent, more abstract kinds of issues that we have a lot more control of. But when it comes to our reproductive health, there's a lot of things, in our own bodies, in our own environments, in the support or lack thereof around us, that can affect what our quality of reproductive health is like, and whether or not we have full and complete reproductive health. So tonight I'm going to talk about sex and reproductive health care. This is inspired in part by a conversation that I've been seeing online. And this popular influencer YouTube couple announced that they were pregnant and then announced that they would be terminating because their child, I think among other reasons, was diagnosed with some genetic predisposition or genetic possibility for a disability, and people are up in arms about whether or not people should be able to access abortion like that. I think people are up in arms in general when it comes to abortion, when it comes to terminating pregnancies. There's the pro-life argument, there's the there are lots of conversations around it that are interesting, and I find it interesting because it requires a lot of legislating and debate over other people's bodies and other people's reproductive decisions. That's why I find it interesting. And so some of the perspectives on this particular issue are very much in this space that abortion is reproductive health care, and people should be able to access abortion for whatever their reasons are. And then, of course, some other arguments are that people shouldn't be tapping into or accessing abortion because a child has a disability. Some arguments that support people's right to access termination and abortion care, which is part of reproductive health care, are around the fact that parents in whatever form they exist, for whatever child they might be having, need to be prepared for that child, right? And I don't think here you can really access genetic testing and them kind of things, right? I'm not sure. Maybe the people who have been through the hospital system here can correct me, but I think for the most part, find out the health of your child, any conditions that your child might have when that child is born. And so people, the whole argument around eugenics and all of these things that I think really do miss the point that when people should choose to be parents, and when they choose to be parents, they should be choosing to be parents. They should be prepared for any situation, because any situation is possible. So parents who are not prepared to, or people who are not prepared to, are not equipped with the tools the skills to raise a child with disabilities. Parents or people, for whatever reason, who are pregnant, who are not pregnant yet, should be able to access all of the care that they need so that they and whatever future children, if they choose to have them, are able to be raised in loving, supportive, caring homes. Anyways, long intro. Just to say that tonight we're talking about sex and reproductive health care. Now, what is reproductive health care and what is reproductive health in general? So major organizations, public health organizations like the World Health Organization, talk about reproductive health being a total or complete state of well-being when it comes to matters of the reproductive system. And it's not just about the absence of disease, but it is about having access, being able to achieve that full and complete state of health. So it means that you have all of the services, all of the information, anything else that you need to help you maintain a healthy reproductive and sexual life. People are also talking about reproductive health, including things like in vitro fertilization. So including services that can help to address fertility issues, fertility and infertility care, services around maternal and perinatal health, prevention and treatment of sexually transmitted infections, protection from violence, education about safe and healthy relationships. So it's not, reproductive health care is not solely focused on what's going on inside a uterus, what's going on inside a scrotum, what's going on, in specific parts of your bodies. It's also the system and environment that allows you to achieve optimum health. And it's also the more social aspect of things, which are the healthy relationships, safe relationships, because all of those things can determine what your reproductive health status is like. Now, experiencing sexual and reproductive health means that a person has complete physical, mental, and social well-being in all matters relating to their reproductive system and its functions. And this is from the World Health Organization. That means that people are able to have satisfying and safe sex lives, to choose when they want to be pregnant, to have safe and healthy pregnancies, when or if they do decide, to decide how often and how many children to have. And it means that nobody else can tell them any of those things, right? It means that there is no reproductive coercion, which is control over somebody else's reproductive functions and systems, and being able to dictate the number of children that people have, the frequency that people have those children, the rate at which they have those children, whether or not they have children. Now, sexual and reproductive health and rights is a whole field, and access to sexual and reproductive health services is a human right, and it has to be available for all people throughout their lives. So it's also not just about whether or not you are of childbearing age and around that childbearing stage. It's also about supporting people through perimenopause, through menopause, throughout their whole life cycle, right? Because throughout the whole life cycle, people have different reproductive health, sexual health needs. And this, of course, we're not just talking about health in a vacuum. We're talking about health fitting within that broader picture around gender equality, around development, how people are able to access those services that they need, that will allow them to show up in the wider society, that will allow them to show up in their relationships, that will allow them to show up in the productive sectors like at their jobs, that will allow them to participate in political life or not. So, for example, look at how we treat people who employers, co-workers, voters, and so on, how we treat women who we feel like are going to be having children, whether or not they have access to jobs, whether some employers are like, okay, well, this person is around that age where people have children, so they're very hesitant to even hire them because the assumption is that they'll be on maternity leave for however long in that space of time. These are real things that people experience. How we treat women politicians who have children or don't have children, because we are also very nasty towards people who we feel like are neglecting what we might feel like are their biological duties, or if they do have children, if we feel like they are abandoning their children by devoting themselves to public office or whatever it is. So all of these things, fit in with reproductive health and rights and sexual health and rights and services. So ensuring access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health services is about upholding people's rights and is about allowing them, as I mentioned, to fully participate in all spheres, whether that is economic spheres, political spheres, and social spheres. And when we invest, research has shown, in a total or comprehensive system or comprehensive set of services that can respond to people's sexual and reproductive health needs, we see improvements in their health, in society, and we also see benefits in the economy, whether that is through decreases in unintended pregnancies, decreases in maternal deaths, decreases in unsafe abortions, being able to fully show up because you have the resources and the help that you need. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about menstrual support, menstrual hygiene, menstrual health, and we talked about whether that is providing some standard days off for people who are experiencing menstrual symptoms or menstruation symptoms, or whether that is providing resources that they might need at work or at school so that they can be there, right? Because we don't also think about how monthly typical human functions affect people's ability to show up daily, to show up for 1 week every month or whatever it is, right? So these are things that have real life implications and real life impacts when they are not present. And so when they are absent, serious negative impacts exist. So whether that impact is on participation, whether that impact is on production and therefore is on earnings, whether that impact is in the reduced numbers of people that we see going up for certain positions, and that might not be political like government office, but it could be organizations, it could be whether that is non-profit organizations, government organizations, other organizations where some people don't show up because of the inadequacies around reproductive health services and supports and challenges that they are experiencing with their reproductive health. So as I mentioned, I just start with a lot of things. This conversation kind of inspired by a discussion that's happening online around this couple that chose to terminate their pregnancy. And I just want to remind folks that reproductive health care, because I think oftentimes when we think about the reproductive system, we think only about pregnancy. But part of that reproductive health care is also termination or abortion system services, is also things like birth control. It's also any other contraceptives that people use to determine if and when and how many children, if and when to have children and how many to have them if they decide how many to have if they decide that they want them. So those are some of the things that we are going to be talking about today. And I've given you a definition of reproductive health, and that being the optimum, the complete state of health, and not just the absence of disease. Because I think sometimes we think that if nothing is wrong, then all is, or if there's no obvious or immediate issue, then that means all is good. But are we really able to live optimally? Like, are we living our best reproductive health lives still? So reproductive health care would include things like routine checkups, STI screening, contraceptive counseling, pregnancy-related care and terminations, menstrual health, fertility services, sexual wellness. And it also wants to focus on preventive care. You know, we always say also prevention is better than a pound of cure. And a lot of the things that, whether they are infections, whether they are challenges, whatever, around reproductive health, everything is usually like better caught early, right? So it's important that we are able to access those routine services that can help to identify issues early on rather than later, that can help to identify things that might become a concern for us later, that can help to guide us through whatever decisions we want to make, and that can be honest about what our realities are, what our experiences are likely to be. So for example, what is the quality of care that we get at gynecologists? And I'm talking about people with vaginas, people with uteruses. What is the quality of care that we get there? What is the quality of care that we get at the public or through the public health system? I know a couple years ago, and we're going to get into birth control, but this is interesting to talk about now, because I remember when I went on birth control, people assumed that it was specifically about pregnancy and not about all of the other benefits or complications that birth control addresses and tries to regulate, like hormonal imbalances, right? And I was going through the clinic system, and I know as part of accessing, at least at the time, birth control, you had to have your pap smears, and all of these things were provided to you free. But if you choose to get pregnant, have and continue with a pregnancy, what is the quality of service and support that you get in that pregnancy stage and after? People are also having conversations about postpartum going much longer than previously thought about. I think typically it's like, the person is pregnant for around 9 months. They have this baby. People get them maybe like 3 months of support. It's kind of like, you have to find your own way around this baby raising thing. And then the support kind of drops off. But people are experiencing postpartum issues up to toddler ages, right? And so how are we sustaining the support that we give to the people that we want to have children? And is that support equal across all folks? Is it equal in quality? Is it equal in consistency? Is it equal in length? And those are all important considerations, because those play a role in people even deciding whether or not they want to have children. What is the quality of care and support going to be if I do have this child, right? So those are important considerations and a huge part of reproductive health care. Now, in terms of birth control and family planning, birth control, and I think we've talked about birth control on the show before. I remember I had a guest from a pharmacy come on to talk about the birth control types that they have available and birth control in general. So I won't, spend too long on it. But birth control has a few functions. One is preventing pregnancy. One is spacing out pregnancies or giving you more control over when those pregnancies do happen. One is managing menstrual symptoms, and one is treating some medical conditions. So people are on birth control pills or other methods for a variety of reasons. So we shouldn't make assumptions when we're talking to people about why they've gone a particular route with something. Like we never know. We never know. And in terms of family planning on contraception more broadly, we're talking about types of methods like barrier methods, hormonal methods, which would be barrier-wise things like condoms. Condoms are good for helping to reduce pregnancy risk, helping to reduce STI transmission risk. Condoms are widely available. Hormonal methods are things like pills, patches, injections, and implants. And these are all very important resources in helping people determine when and if to have children, and also helping people to keep themselves and their partners protected from STIs. And as part of that protection, as part of that conversation around reproductive health, remember I mentioned it also means safer sex options. So keeping people safe also means that you have good and quality, confidential, widely available options for testing and for treatment. It means that people don't talk your business when you come in to say that you want to be tested for something. It means that people also don't assume that you don't have certain things, because I've had people like look at me and be like, okay, you don't have XYZ, you don't have, like, with no testing, just assumptions. And so those are things that we need to check too, because these are all rooted in stigma. They're all rooted in persistent myths around who gets infected with STIs, who transmits STIs, and they all need to be addressed if we are going to reduce the transmission and improve treatment outcomes for people with STIs. Let's take a break here, give everybody a time to think about what I've said so far, and then we'll come back and keep talking. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Pleasure Pulse. I'm your host, Roma Richardson, and we've been talking about sex and reproductive health. Sex and reproductive and sexual health, all of those together. So far, we've talked about what reproductive health is, some facets of reproductive health, the inspiration for this conversation, and now I'm going to talk a bit about not in specifics, because I'm not a doctor. Y'all know I like to have experts to talk about certain things, but this is an introduction to the topic. So specific aspects of the topic will be fleshed out later with a qualified medical professional. But I'm talking about things in terms of the need for their availability, as well as the social issues surrounding them, attitudes towards them. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about. So next, I want to touch just briefly on fertility and reproductive health and how those connect, because today I was also having a conversation with someone who had their first child at 34, and I have been thinking about, because it's a very interesting thing to me how people of certain ages and in certain contexts, relationship agreements and so on, are discouraged to have children, or discouraged from having children, or are criticized for having children and criticized for having a certain number of children. But if you wait what people consider too long, then you're also kind of criticized and not necessarily always held with the gentleness that you might need. So, for example, the suggestion of having children somewhere on your early 20s, anytime after 35 is what they call advanced maternal age, and probably anywhere after 26 and so on is when there used to be a lot more franticness around reproductive health decline or reproductive decline, and so the encouragement was always kind of to not wait too long, but also to don't have children too early. So people, I think, are in this space where they are trying to, many people make sure they have all of the things lined up that socially we have told people they need to have lined up. Like, you should be married, you should have a house, you should have financial resources, you should have this, you should have that, married and, a loyal partner or whatever. But that is tending to happen for more and more people later and later in life. In addition to that, with all of the education that people are pursuing, school takes up, quite a bit of your time. Finding a partner isn't always possible in those earlier years, at least a partner that you see yourself spending the rest of your life with or having a child with. And so children are coming later and later, but are the services that exist matching or keeping up with the social reality of what is happening? And are those services evolving at the same pace to meet those needs? Because I do know a lot of people in their 40s, 30 late, who are like, okay, yeah, now is when I feel ready to have a child, or who did have a child around that time. Did they get the services and the support that they need? And for the folks who can have fertility challenges at any age, are we providing all of the access that they need? Are those services accessible? Are those services affordable for the people who would like to have children along a certain kind of route, can they really tap into those services like IVF? Can they tap into the services like surrogacy? Can they tap into any other kinds of services that might increase their fertility, that might increase or address reproductive health conditions that they have? What are attitudes towards aging people in general, and how do we feel like we should continue to support them as they experience reproductive health phases and stages, right? Or are we kind of like dismissive of people once they reach a certain age? If they decide they want to have a child, then we know men can, people with penises, people with sperm, have children, long into their lives. And I think research has found that whereas before, the conversations really used to be focused on the person with the uterus as the one holding all of the challenges, all of the complications, I think research is increasingly, shifting towards the quality, the potency of things like sperm, and seeing how all persons involved in that reproductive process can be experiencing issues that might be affecting their desired pregnancy outcome or whatever it is, right? But just essentially, are we as a society continuing to provide the services that people need for the choices that they want to make at whatever stage they are in life? Are those choices, are those needs really being met, really being understood, really being addressed? Or are we continuing to just insist that you should have children within a certain age, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of your own, desires for your life or whatever it is, right? So we know that there are lots of things that can affect fertility. And we also know that there are services that exist to address some of those things and to improve pregnancy and fertility outcomes. We're seeing people, there are lots, I think way more now, support groups, public conversations around things like polycystic ovary syndrome, around endometriosis, other concerns that people had. Even on the menstrual health show, we talked about what pain, during a period might mean, and the fact that there is support that you can access for pain that you feel in your body at different times of the month, at different times of the year, at different times throughout your life, because it can change, right? We discussed the fact that none of this is a given, and the things that people experience don't have to be the things that follow them throughout their lives, right? Even though we have been conditioned to believe that once you have a uterus, once you have a period, expect pain and sometimes debilitating pain to go with it. I think the information coming out is rightly showing us that some of it might be health conditions that can be improved. Some of it might be pain, just pain that can, or rather underlying health conditions that can be improved, and pain that can be addressed and reduced if we seek help. So part of that reproductive health service provision too is normalizing conversations about these things, right? Making it commonplace for people to discuss their experiences with their periods, for people to discuss experiences with fibroids and how fibroids can affect your reproductive health, your ability to have and to get pregnant and to maintain that pregnancy. All of these things are reproductive health conversations that we have to have more if we want the information to be out there and if we want the people to access the services that they need and deserve. Because remember, we said reproductive health is a state of optimum, health and optimum well-being. It's not just about not having a disease, but it is about still being able to function, right? Like not taking for granted or not accepting that, okay, for 3 days out of the month, I just won't move. I just can't move. And that's just my lot in life. It is being able to say something about this and get the right help that we need. I find that too often too. We go to places seeking help and we're dismissed, or our level of pain, our level of discomfort is kind of diminished, is downplayed, whether that is by ourselves or by medical practitioners around us. I think sometimes, especially these kinds of reproductive health issues, are not taken as seriously as they can be, even when sometimes later down the line you find that it either was a very serious issue or was an issue, a challenge that could have been addressed through easier, technologies, through easier resources or whatever it is. And I think that a lot of this is rooted in discomfort around bodies, especially I think bodies with uteruses and vaginas. Discomfort, ignorance, because we're still learning things about bodies that have vaginas, right? So I think a lot of it is rooted around it, but I think a lot of it is also rooted in discomfort with sex and the idea of sex, the idea of sexuality, all of these things. But without addressing them head on, without addressing them openly, without conversations, without being honest about what it means to experience certain things, what it means to have certain reproductive health conditions, we aren't going to get the help that we need, and we aren't going to continue to push the medical practitioners, the researchers, the scientists, all of those people to continue doing work to find out more about these conditions so that they can provide better resources and help to address these conditions. I don't know if I should end with this, but I kind of also wanted to talk a bit about abortion. Abortion is legal in our law under certain conditions, and those conditions surround protecting the life of the mother. And I think from what I remember, it also considers things like the mental health and well-being of the mother as well. There are lots of myths. Oh, sorry, earlier I had a total blank. It was pro-life or pro-choice. There are lots of myths around abortion. There are lots of attitudes and ideas, philosophies, whatever you want to call them, around abortion too. Many are grounded in religion. Many are grounded in misinformation. So many are just not true, right? And so what should be a procedure without so much stigma, without so much around it, has turned into a moral thing, right? A moral pronouncement. Whether or not you are a good person is something that is concluded, or that is something that is determined by your position on abortion and by your access or accessing abortion, your openness to abortion. It is a safe and common medical procedure. And people also talk about what happens in like DNCs that are also terminations, are also abortions. There are different kinds of abortions, but still terminations all the same. And so because of a lot of this stigma, because of these attitudes, because of whether it is religious, whether it is moral, wherever it comes from, people who need abortions are often prevented from accessing them. And even though, research has found that safe legal abortions do not cause long-term physical health problems or affect future fertility or cause across the board mental health issues, myths prevail, misinformation prevails, and people continue to have to find their own ways of terminating pregnancies. Full stop. And this, while I was coming here now, I was thinking about how similar this is to sex ed information, and the fact that people think that if you provide accurate, comprehensive sex education, then people will have sex, or then people will be encouraged to have sex. Just like if you show people how to use a condom, then they will go and have sex. It's kind of similar in or the idea that if we don't provide this information, if we don't do these things, then they won't have sex. It's kind of similar to the idea that the misconception that people won't seek abortions whether or not they have healthy, safe and legal options to do it. So the idea that there are ways that we can prevent people from having sex, and the idea that we can prevent people from having abortions are both false ideas. I remember I was in a conversation with some folks a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about abortions. We were talking about some of the things that we heard growing up. If we wanted to terminate, whether that was drinking hot Guinness, people used to talk about throwing themselves downstairs. I know people used to talk about drinking Clorox. I don't know if any others come to mind. But these are all, like, when you hear them, extremely risky things. And I also gave the example, which is something I remember, learning about in school, people taking apart hangers, like wire hangers, and using those to cause abortions. And the fact that these are all things that put the person, seeking to have that abortion's life at risk too, because none of these things is safe. These things can have and have had fatal consequences. And the alternative is that we provide people with safe options, and that these safe options don't come with a huge set of conditions that people have to meet in order to have access to them. So it should be, you shouldn't have to, prove for whatever reason that your life is at risk in order to have that abortion. It shouldn't be about somebody else making the decision for you, whatever that decision is, because in that same conversation with you folks, some people talked about a teen mom being forced to have an abortion that they did not want to have. So abortion access is about being able to be fully informed about the service that you're attempting to access and being provided accurate information on it. So it's not about going to religious counseling or having your pastor there next to the nurse while you're asking questions about an abortion if the pastor is there for the specific focus of trying to convince you not to. It is about people being able to make their own decisions about their own reproductive health, about their own bodies. Like, that's what it is. It comes down to, what do you want to do with or carry in your body? What are you prepared for? What are you ready for? And how can we support you in whatever those decisions are? Mind you, it's important for us to have access to services that can help us before getting to that point. So that is something that, we need to bear in mind, because many times unintended pregnancies happen because those reproductive health services like contraception, whether it's birth control, condoms or whatever, were not available or accessible in the first place, right? So it is necessary for us to provide services and resources for people who might be at any stage of their reproductive health journey. And it's important for us to always provide accurate information, unbiased as much as possible information, not opinions, but facts about what people are experiencing. And it's also important for us not to exaggerate what certain services are, because the way that people have talked about abortion over the years, it's like at 2 weeks the fetus inside what's the G word, I can't remember, is a fully formed human with legs and hair and eyes who can hear you, and that is not true, right? So it is important for us to ensure that at every stage we're providing accurate information, appropriate resources, and the help that people need and asked for, and not the help that we determine that they should get because wherever, right? All of these decisions, all of these realities, once we address them fully, once we are honest with ourselves about what our own limits are, because people are uncomfortable with things, and it's okay. Like, it's okay for you to be uncomfortable with certain things, but it's not okay for us to withhold services from people who need them because of our discomfort. If we are uncomfortable with a certain situation, then that's when we tap into our people around us. That's when we refer people, because people should always have access to the things that they need so that they can choose and create the lives that they want. Yeah. So I want to end just by reminding us that reproductive health has a huge impact on, is a huge part of our lives. It is not separate from, just like sex isn't separate from our lives. It is a part of our lives and a part of how we move through and experience the world. And we have a responsibility to ensure that our systems, that our structures, that our institutions, that our policymakers, that our service providers, that our families, our teachers, our people around us are helping to provide the things that people need, the things that people are asking for, helping to provide guidance, helping to provide accurate information. So that also means being honest about how certain resources, how certain things should be used, and not in judgmental ways, but just in ways where we are about sharing the information, letting people know what the facts are, and allowing them to make informed decisions. With that, I'll leave you at I'm looking forward to what folks might think about tonight's conversation. As I mentioned, I know some of the topics, fraught with ideas from different spaces and different spheres, but I encourage you to do some research into all of the things that we've talked about tonight and see how maybe you can expand your thinking around some things. See how we can do some advocacy around some things that give people the options that they deserve. With that, I'll leave you here and I'll wish you a pleasurable evening, and I will see you all next time. Bye.